Since the dawn of time, sports media has been stuck in a vicious cycle of monotony and Skip Bayless. Then one day, 3 brave souls embarked on a journey to change all of that. Welcome to the Comeback Kid.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this edition of The Comeback Kid. I am your host, Ben Friedel, and alongside me, as always, Nate Wiggins, Matt Hendrickson. Before I even ask you guys how you're doing, how was that intro? Oh my gosh.
Oh man, I loved it. That was tremendous. Shout out to Seth, who helped us make that. That was awesome.
Yep, Seth Lou, station manager here at USD TV. He produces his own music, and he's like, hey, I like you guys. I'm going to make these station liners for you, and wow, they came out great, right, Matt?
A single tear flows down my cheek every single time I hear that. That is both intimidating and probably the most beautiful thing I've ever heard.
Yes, I think intimidating would definitely be a good word for it. So, you guys have a good weekend?
I've had better weekends, but, I wasn't too stressed, so that was all right.
Yeah, I got to see Nate get all stressed out about Michigan football, so I'd say that my weekend was quite all right, and and yeah, a lot of sitting around doing nothing, but it's kind of nice not to have to worry about things for a little while.
Yeah, we're just constantly building each other up here on the Comeback Kid. If you're a regular listener, you know this all too well. I'm being sarcastic, of course. We love to disparage each other constantly. So, before we jump into our first topic, guys, let's just reiterate what we do here on the Comeback Kid. So every Monday at 9 a.m., we hope to talk about sports and stories that may not get enough attention on major sports networks. This includes soccer. I mean, I think the MLS playoffs are going on. I don't know. There was an international break in the middle there. That's pretty poorly timed, wouldn't you say, Nate?
Oh, man, I don't even know what to say.
Yeah, well, anyway, so we hope to maybe sometimes talk about MLS, mostly European soccer, which is, a tad bit better. Baseball offseason, which can be really entertaining. The NHL, as well as other sports. But most importantly, we definitely want to talk about sports that we want to talk about here on the Comeback Kid. That is our true mission statement that we hope to do every single show, and we hope to bring you guys every single Monday. So, let's get right into it, guys. So, we have down the road a school. I don't know if you guys knew this. There's a school down the road. It's called San Diego State. I know, right? I mean, I've never heard of them. And apparently, their mascot is no more. The San Diego State Aztecs no longer have the Aztecs. And while their school mascot, it will still be the San Diego State Aztecs. I should reiterate this. They are getting rid of the physical mascot himself. And if you're unfamiliar with their mascot, he is a real-life person. It's not a person in a suit who runs around at formerly Qualcomm Stadium, now San Diego County Credit Union Stadium over in Mission Valley, and he's usually in pretty good shape, has no shirt. He blows on what is it, like a conch?
Yeah,
a conch shell, runs around. I don't know, he doesn't do much else. He's dressed in I guess, quote-unquote, traditional Aztec attire.
Yeah, he wears like a headdress.
Yeah. So he wears a headdress, and yeah, so their mascot recently has come under fire because many people who identify with Aztec culture, or Aztec culture is a part of their, historical upbringing, or part of their cultural significance, like specifically Mexico or other Latin American countries, hold the Aztec culture and people in high regard in their personal histories. Those people were not too thrilled with the mascot. I think especially in recent years, because I think social and cultural acumen for certain social justice issues has increased over the past even 3-4 years about issues such as these. So to recap what went on, the University Senate at San Diego State overwhelmingly voted to retire the Aztec warrior mascot and all related symbols by a vote of 52-14. This vote was comprised of professors, lecturers, coaches, staff members, and students. I think a lot of people just immediately assume that it was students voting on this, but no, it was a collective vote amongst a lot of staff and different people involved at the university. And basically what this vote did was not only is it retiring the mascot, it is calling away with the human representation of basically everything like Aztec related almost, which includes spears and other weapons that, quote-unquote, I'm quoting the San Diego Union Tribune here, weapons that connote barbaric representations of the Aztec culture. So, that's a lot of background there, but that's basically the situation that's going on not even 15 minutes down the road from us. The question I have for you guys is, was this a good decision for San Diego State?
Well, just for a little context, I grew up a San Diego State fan, and so like the Aztec Warrior was like, he was just like the coolest thing ever to me. But I think that this was a good decision, particularly when you talk about like the barbaric representations, because the idea of natives in the Americas being barbaric was like propaganda for Europeans, and so justified their colonization. And so I think to represent the Aztec warrior as a like sort of barbaric figure, I think that it's good to get away from that, because you're getting away from this European colonialist propaganda.
I also think it's a great decision. What I think is very important about this decision, and you touched on it, Ben, is that this was a collective vote. It wasn't just the students or people that you would automatically assume would be more passionate about this. It was faculty. I would assume some key donors or board members were also involved in this vote. The one thing that I'm concerned about is, why is this happening in the middle of the school year? Like, why is this happening in the midst of a fairly successful football season, and as basketball season starting up? Why is this happening right now?
Yeah, that's a good question, Matt. So, just to reiterate, we are in November. This isn't the summer. This isn't the start of the school year. And so that begs the question. You're in the middle of a fairly successful football season. Your basketball season just kicked off, arguably San Diego State's most successful sport. And with all of these great athletic-related news topics going on at San Diego State, they decide to get rid of their mascot, which, although all of us are somewhat on the same page that we, think it's somewhat of a good decision. I think a lot of people who, or a lot of alumni and people who have grown up with the mascot have expressed a lot of outrage at this, because they don't understand, like why an Aztec would be removed, especially since an Aztec warrior amongst many circles could be seen as like a symbol of pride, right, Nate?
Yeah. I actually I'm friends with a lot of SDSU alumni on Facebook, and I see a lot of their posts, and they're a bit of an older bunch, so they are pretty upset about this. But I think what I would say to them if I was the university is like, look, times are changing. This something like that may have flown, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, heck, even 5 years ago. This wasn't even a discussion. But now I think with our current political climate, and I think just the racism that we see in everyday life, I think that this was pretty, like you said, the timing is a bit weird, but it makes sense just with everything that's going on socially, politically in our country.
I would definitely agree with that. Socially and politically, we're in a whole new ball game, so to speak. Like, this is a completely different era that we're living in versus, the generation before us or the generation even before that. It's an interesting conundrum, because a lot of alumni donors potentially could be involved with such, they could be outraged to the point where they stop giving money to a program. I don't anticipate that being too much of a burden for San Diego State with the size of that school. But to go off of your point, there is a person, I'm not going to mention any names, but someone affiliated with USD who I came into contact with, and to your point about, I think, cultural sensitivity, his point was, and he's an older gentleman, he was saying that he was outraged by this decision, and I'm roughly paraphrasing here, but he was saying that the Aztec people are dead, so why should anyone care? And that was like, he's a person of like authority, so I didn't want to call him out, and my grade may or may not be relying on his opinion. However, I was like, what the heck? That is such an insensitive comment, because you drive 20 minutes south of where we are to Mexico, and that is a culture that even if you drive around the city of Tijuana, you see like Aztec-related architecture, you see Aztec-related symbols of pride. And so just writing off an entire culture just because it's quote unquote non-existent anymore, or like the original people don't exist anymore, I think is very insensitive. And I think that is definitely a lens that some people are taking in this argument.
That is such an unbelievably ignorant take. And I mean, yeah, the Aztec people are gone, but let's think why they're gone. It was because Europeans came to Latin America, came to Mexico, brought with them diseases, and wiped out the entire indigenous population by either disease or just slaughtering them. So, yeah, the Aztec culture, the Aztec people are gone, but they're gone because of genocide.
Definitely. It's a very interesting dilemma that they have going on, and it's going to be interesting to see moving forward, I think, what they replace their mascot with, if they even do replace the mascot, or like the Union Tribune mentioned, they're maybe planning on getting rid of like all like spear related symbols, and their normal SD logo has a spear on it. So would we see potentially a redesigning of the logo that would appear on football helmets, so on and so forth? So it's going to be really interesting to stay up to date with that story as it moves forward. And I think in somewhat related news, let's spin this toward USD, guys. Let's look internally here. So we have a mascot here. His name is Diego Torero, right? He is is he Spanish? Is he a Spanish bullfighter? He's a bullfighter.
Spanish.
So I guess hailing from Spain, but he's a cartoon, right? He's a cartoon caricature of a Spanish bullfighter. So my question to you guys, since San Diego State has taken these steps by an overwhelming majority, actually, to get rid of a person who many think, or a mascot who many think represents a symbol of pride for the Aztec culture, why the heck has no changes happened regarding Diego the Torero?
Talk about being culturally insensitive. I mean, bullfighting is still such a sensitive issue wherever you go, and especially, we always say this, but 20 minutes down south, this is something that happens, but we're just making a joke out of it, basically, having Diego around. And then also talking about, you said, overwhelming majority vote in a huge public university. What is a small, private, change-making university doing, not having this changed already? I think that this is probably a discussion that's being had right now as we speak. I'm sure the right people saw that San Diego State had changed their mascot, or are in the process of changing their mascot, or really just rebranding. Hopefully this is a conversation that's being had right now, especially since this is something that we like to take pride in, being more progressive than a lot of schools. So hopefully this happens soon.
So I think the reason why there hasn't been a change with Diego is, personally, I think people just don't care enough. I think that, with San Diego State, because their athletics programs have been so successful over the past couple of years, and because they have this huge alumni population in San Diego, I'm sure that they may have been getting pressure from people outside the university that were saying, hey, this needs to be something you look into. But I think here at USD, people just don't care enough. The students don't care enough. The alumni don't care enough. So I think that's why we haven't seen a change with Diego Torero. But I mean, Diego Torero, like, just the mascot himself is like kind of creepy, honestly. Yeah. So I wish that they would change it. Just A, because it's pretty insensitive, and B, because he's just creepy.
Yeah, and I think your guys' point about, like, we just don't care enough, I want to dig into a little bit of that. Like, why don't we care enough? Is it a question of, I think immediately what comes to mind is our school, just demographic-wise, is very white. We'll just say it. We go to a very white school in terms of, like, I don't know the exact percentage, but a larger percentage of our school is white versus, San Diego State. We'll use that as a comparison. San Diego State is a very diverse university. I think that plays in part with the tuition dollar amount that they have over at San Diego State. Therefore, I want to pose the question to you guys: does this have to do this lack of care in terms of cultural sensitivity have to do with our demographics, not only within our student body but within our administration potentially?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a cultural thing, because it's interesting to me how the school prides itself on trying to be like this progressive institution, and the idea of being a change maker, inclusivity, all those types of things. But I honestly, as a minority on this campus, I don't feel like the school does enough in terms of trying to be like inclusive, trying to be change makers. And I'll give Dr. Harris credit. He's done a lot, because what I've heard is that before him it was very, very bad. But I feel like the university is like goes out of their way to try and be inclusive and goes out of their way to try and be like show how like progressive we are, when in reality that's honestly making things worse. And so when I applied to this school, I was called in for an interview, and one of the questions that they asked me was like, well, how would you feel about going to a predominantly white institution? And I said that these are my feelings about it. And then the next question they asked was that, okay, what are the steps that we should take in order to try and diversify our campus? And at the time, I didn't think about it too heavily, like what these questions really meant. But thinking back on it now, I almost feel like that doing something like that is one of those things where it's almost like the "I'm not racist, I have a black friend" kind of line of thinking. It's like, hey, well, clearly we're not racist because, like, hey, we are, we're admitting black students, and if you go on the website, there's like pictures of minority kids, but like in reality, like, what is the school actually doing? Am I making sense here?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah,
okay,
no, that definitely makes sense. So in your guys' opinions, would maybe not completely getting rid of Diego the Torero, but at least having some sort of alterations to our mascot, would that be a step in the right direction in order for the school to, live, like, not just be all talk, like to live up to the words of being a change maker and being inclusive?
Yeah. I think, like you said, just an alteration. I'm not saying, let's, we don't need to make any huge radical changes yet, but I think that, taking small steps, I think would go a long way in terms of working to change kind of the culture of the campus.
Definitely. Great stuff, guys. So I think this conversation could be extended even further, because this is a conversation that has really been prevalent in recent years on a professional scale with a lot of different professionals teams. There's the Cleveland Indians, which that name has been called into question recently, especially with their success reaching the World Series and them being on a global stage. I feel like that definitely spurred some kind of argument as to should there be some alterations. We've talked about this. We think they should switch to, we already have an idea for what they could switch to. We think they could go to the Cleveland Tribe, because the word tribe is a positively and accurately connotative Native American terminology. So, Cleveland is one team. Another team is the NFL team in Washington. I don't even feel comfortable saying that team name out loud, because their team name, Nate, you were telling me, is it's not exactly the same, but has some sort of cultural relevance, or similarities to the African American population with the N-word, potentially. So for me, why the heck does the team in Washington still have that name? And then there are teams like the Chiefs, which have, a lot of people think they actually do the play off of the theme of Native Americans correctly. However, I want to get your guys' take. Are there any teams that I haven't mentioned or teams I have mentioned that should make proactive changes immediately, gradually? Give me your guys' take.
Well, I think that the Indians, I think that, we talked about the Tribe. I think that would be just a pretty good name for the team. And I mean, they already got rid of Chief Wahoo, and that was actually interesting. I didn't even notice that they got rid of Chief Wahoo until like halfway through the season. I was on Twitter and I saw like an Indian tweet, and I was like, wait a minute, what happened to Chief Wahoo? It's just the C now. I hadn't even noticed that they had gotten rid of it because they did it so casually. They kind of just phased it out. Like you said with the Washington football team, I stopped saying that name like 4 years ago, because I actually heard an interview with Champ Bailey, the former NFL cornerback, and he was saying that, that word is pretty much not exactly the same, but it's pretty much the same thing as them being the Washington N-words. And so as soon as I heard that, I was like, I actually did my research, and I was like, wow, that term, those terms are pretty much identical. And so after that, I was like, yeah, there's no chance I'm going to be saying that word anymore. I think I made my point pretty clear.
I think some other teams that do their logos or mascots right are Florida State Seminoles. We talked about that they have a relationship with the Seminole tribe there. And I would assume that the North Dakota Sioux have to do a lot of the same, just considering that, especially everything that's going on in North Dakota right now. So there are some collegiate teams that are doing well with their mascots and probably won't see a change anytime soon. But that's just because those relationships have been maintained for long enough now, where it is a sign of respect and they're doing that in the right way. I don't think I need to say anything else about Washington. Obviously, I think what surprises me is that it's been there for so long in our nation's capital. Like, what if this was like, Kentucky? It'd be like a different story. Like, well, of course, it's Kentucky, but this is our nation's capital, where a lot of things are under a big focal point. But I guess the team names weren't even that important. We have the Washington Capitals. Like, it could be something as easy as that. But we haven't had anything change. When I'm sure enough people are mad enough about this.
It's going to be very interesting to see moving forward how this, I believe, friction between, I don't even want to say new school thinking, but maybe more empathetic thinking is pushing back on stubborn traditionalism and how people are just resistant to change just for the fact that it's changed, and they're completely blind to the reality that, teams such as the NFL team in Washington, that team name is just obscenely offensive. So great stuff, you guys. It's very, very interesting to see what's going on down at San Diego State. It's really interesting to see if us as a campus here at USD are going to make any proactive changes, and if the larger sphere of professional sports will continue to move in the right direction. So great stuff, you guys. When we come back, we're going to discuss a busy week of soccer. Soccer is back from the international break. Arsenal, baby, we did it. We beat Tottenham over the weekend. I can't believe it. We'll talk all about it when we get back. Stay tuned, you guys.